Hello and thanks for joining me today. If you're a new visitor, I'd like to say welcome, and of course welcome back to all my subscribers. So today we're going to be doing a little dog. I'm starting by doing him in pencil. I know you can't see the pencil lines very well on the video, so I'm actually speeding up the first part of the video where I'm doing the drawing, and then I'm going to go over it with some darker lines of an ink pen that's waterproof, so then we can go over with the watercolour paints. So when you're drawing animals, the thing to remember is that they're all different and all the proportions are different. When we do people, there are a lot of resources on the internet where we can see how the proportions of people are in general. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rule, but when we're thinking of adults, children are different again. But when we're thinking of adults, there are quite a few rules we can follow about the way, how many times the head goes into the body, whereabouts the eyes sit on the face, and all that kind of thing. Now with animals that's quite different because there's such a variety of animals, and even within one type of animal there are also different sorts. So with dogs, I mean, if you think about something like a sausage dog compared to something like a greyhound, the proportions are going to be completely different. So the only way we can do it is to tackle them all individually. Still thinking about the skeleton underneath and the muscles, thinking about the shapes underneath before we put the coat on top. But of course we can use the coat to help us with that. So look very carefully, firstly at the measurements. So compare measurements, compare the width of the head to the length of the ear, compare the width of the head to the length of the body or the legs, compare the length of the legs to the length of the back, the width of the feet to the width of the nose, all these kind of things. If you keep measuring those and checking them against each other, you'll end up with a more accurate drawing. As well as doing measurements, line things up. So does his nose come in line with his chest? Do his eyes come in line with the top of his ear? Look to see where things line up together, and that way you'll get the posture right as well as the proportions and the sizing right. So, and the other thing with your drawing is look very carefully at the fur, because although we can't see perhaps where his joints are, where his knees and his hips and his shoulders and everything else are because of the amount of fur on him, if you look at the way the fur is lying and the way that the fur is going across the legs and the chest and things, that gives you an indication of the shape of his body underneath, which will all help to make a more convincing picture. Okay, so just carefully observe what you're drawing. Don't rush it. You'll have more time than I've got. Obviously when I'm doing these videos I'm conscious of time because I don't want to bore you, and also because of my own time. So it's usually quite a quick little picture that I'm drawing you, and I'm always aware that you will have more time to do a more accurate drawing than I do in these little demonstrations. This is just to help you with, you know, a few hints and tips really. And of course when I'm doing my own work I would spend, you know, hours doing it rather than these few minutes. So bear that in mind when you're watching me, that you will have time to put a lot more detail in than I am. And of course you don't have to use a pen either. You could just do a pencil drawing and then do your watercolour, and use the watercolour to do your detail if you don't like the look of the pen. I quite like the look of the pen and I quite like using it for the detail, but you don't have to, that's just optional. Okay, so once I've finished the pen drawing, I'm going to go on to put the colour on, and I'm just going to use 3 colours. So we've got cobalt blue, which I've used in the sky, we've got burnt sienna, and we've got yellow ochre. So I use the cobalt blue and the burnt sienna together to make both the greys and the reds of the dog's coat. So it's quite a good exercise for beginners as well, when you're painting something like this, to try and limit the amount of colours that you use and have a look at colour mixing. I haven't actually got a piece of paper here to test out the colours, but that's always a good idea if you can have a scrap piece of paper to the side of you and test your colours before you put them on the paper. So you can see the burnt sienna mixed with the cobalt makes quite a nice grey that you can use for all sorts of things. Now one golden rule to remember with watercolour is to put on, if the paper's wet with the paint already and you're putting extra paint on, to make sure that that second application of paint is thicker than the first, i.e. you've got more pigment and less water. If you add more water to less pigment already on the paper, you end up with the mess that I made in the sky. I shouldn't have gone back into that sky, and you'll see why. You can see the mess that's made. So what happens is the drier pigment on the paper pulls in that water from your brush because you've added too much water. So always a higher concentration of paint on the second application when you're painting wet in wet. So I'm not going to paint the whole thing wet in wet. At one point later on I will let him dry, and then I'll come back and put his detail on. So also with this little dog we need to think about painting white. Lots of animals have white on them, so it's something that's a good practice. So we'll leave the white of the paper for the lightest parts of the dog, and then we use some shadow colours on that white to give some form to him. So as well as the drawing giving the proportions and the posture, also thinking about the painting to give you that posture. So where we put the shadow will help make his form, and this applies to all objects that you're drawing. If you want to make them more 3D, is to get the shadow in. So look very carefully at your reference picture where it's absolutely the darkest and absolutely the lightest. Then of course you've got all the different tones in between, but try and don't be frightened of going quite dark. Look at how dark I've got it underneath his chest there. So go nice and dark, and then leave the white of the paper for your highlights. So having those contrasts will make it a much more interesting painting. Okay, so have fun with this. The picture I'm using is one I found on Pixabay. I'll put the link to Pixabay below. You might find some other dogs on there that you'd like to have a go at, or you might want to try a different animal, because like I say, it's all about looking. So, and spend some time on your drawing. The most important thing about painting is drawing. If your drawing's correct before you start applying your watercolour, then it's going to be much easier for you. It's very difficult with watercolour to correct your drawing. When you're doing an oil painting, if your drawing's gone wrong and you can tell later that your drawing is wrong, you can correct it. But with watercolour, if your drawing is wrong, it's going to show through the whole painting. So spend more time doing your drawing than you do applying your paint to get that accurate drawing. So keep looking at the measurements like I've just said before. Okay, so have fun with it. Let me know how you get on. If there's any questions that you want to ask me about doing animals in watercolour, if you want to pop those in the comments below, and if there's anything I've missed out and forgotten to tell you, just ask away. I'm quite happy to respond to your questions. So once again, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I'm just going to carry on now with the painting. Like I said, just with those 3 colours, just to show you really that you don't need loads of colours to get that form and get the shape of the animal. Okay, so thanks for watching, and bye for now. I look forward to seeing you again soon.